This is our gorgeous girl Lily, and that's either Amy or Sophie, and there's also Chloe and Ellie, and probably a few others. There's probably all 6 of the girls crushed into that little cage. Now today I'm just going to answer some questions that we've had. The first question that we often get asked is, what age are rats suitable pets for? Well, I personally wouldn't recommend them for anyone under 10. Your child has to be sensible enough to look after the rat properly, to know how to handle them, and to be sensitive to the needs of the rat. Some 10-year-olds are mature enough, some 14-year-olds are not mature enough. So you need to look at your child, and the important thing to remember is that you are responsible for any animal that comes into your house. So anyone who's under 18 that has an animal, you have to check that animal daily, that it is okay, that it's fed, it's watered, receives veterinary care, and this make sure the safety of the animal is paramount. Now, if you have younger children, you must be very careful, you know, when you're handling your rats, because young children can step on animals, they can sit on them, they can grab them, they can cause enormous damage. So if you have young children and you want rats, just take very special care when handling your rats, and teach your children from a young age not to put the fingers in the cage, not to touch. Make sure the cage can't be opened by children. And if you have an older child and they want the cage in the room, I would say no. If your child is under 16, I would not allow anyone to have the cage in their room. We keep all of our rat cages in the communal living room, where we can all come and check the animals anytime we want, and that is best for you because you can see that the animals are being handled okay. If you've got an older teenager, they could take the rats to their room for playtime, and then they can bring them back to the cage. So just be aware that you're responsible. Some people have said, if you have disabilities, would rats make a good pet? Now, I have mentioned before, if you have disabilities, that means you don't have understanding and empathy, that you can't understand the needs of the animal, then no, I would not let anyone have an animal who was not 100% able to mentally cope. Physically, they can make brilliant companion pets. You don't have to take them for a walk. Your only limitations is, can you actually care for them? Can you do the physical cleaning out, get them out every day? I would say if you're in a wheelchair, just to be very careful that you don't move the chair when you have your rats out, and that you have someone with you to, if the rat runs away, that they can retrieve the rat for you. And you know, if you have illnesses where you're sometimes unable to do things, then you must have somebody who can come and help you. But they can make brilliant companion pets, and you again will have to judge your own circumstances as to whether you feel that physically you can cope. Let me just think, how many rats should I have? Now this comes up again and again, and I always say any number except for 1. If you get a lone rat, or you have a lone rat, it's always best to have a friend. The social animals, they need to live in groups. If you go to the pet shop to get 2 rats and there's 3 there, take the 3rd one as well. Groups of 3 or 4 are lovely. They're not much more trouble, not much more bedding and food. So, you know, don't leave a lone rat on its own, and always get little groups, at least 2. And if you're starting off and you start with 2, you can always add another 2 a bit later. So, why does my rat sometimes eat his droppings or drink his urine? Well, this can have, it can be quite common in young rats. We've seen all of our young rats do this. Some people say they're gaining some sort of nutrients from their droppings. Now, I'm not entirely convinced. I think it's just something that they do. I don't really know. But what I do know is that it can be, especially in older rats, it can be a sign of health problems. Whenever we've had an older rat eat their droppings or drink their urine, they've always been unwell. So if they do this more, you know, persistently, or suddenly start doing this, then get them checked out at the vet and just see what's wrong with them. It can also be things like boredom. they may need extra play time out of the cage, so new toys to play with, or if you've recently rearranged the cage or they've had an upset to their routine, sometimes they get a little bit overprotective and they just decide to do these silly things. But always look, you know, just in case it's a health problem, because changes in behaviour can always be linked to health. How long can I leave my rats alone? Well, you can't leave them for longer than a day, so if it's fine to go to work or go to school, but if you're going away overnight, I personally wouldn't ever leave an animal overnight. I would have somebody to stay with them. If you're going away for the weekend, then you need ideally a sensible, reliable friend who can pop in a couple of times a day, do food, water, check your animals are okay, because your animals are going to get lonely, especially your rats. There are also pet sitting services available. If you're going away for a week or 2 weeks, then you need someone to stay or come in twice a day. Or boarding kennels. Sometimes vets and pet shops offer boarding service. Pet shop would be my last resort. Now, is it okay to kiss my rat? The general advice is don't kiss your rat and don't allow your children to kiss any animals. But if you're over 18, I would say to you, if you want to kiss your rat, just be sensible. I kiss my rats, I've always kissed my rats, I've never caught anything from them, and rats are just kissable. And all of my friends will tell you the same, they all kiss their rats, but I would recommend that you don't allow your children to kiss your rats. And also, to be very important on the hygiene, making sure that you wash your hands after you've handled your rats and when you've cleaned out, and that children particularly wash their hands very well and don't let them put their hands in their mouth or eat or drink or anything. If you have any cuts on your hand, then I would suggest that you wear some disposable gloves while you're cleaning out to protect your hands. Let me think, what else we got? Why do we keep our rats in smaller groups? A couple of reasons. When we have groups of rats, we find that the young ones, they have different needs. The young ones are lively and bouncing about, the older ones want to sleep a lot, and the middle-aged ones want a bit of both. So we tend to have 3 cages, one with our younger rats, one with the older ladies, and one with our middle-aged rats. That works well for us. We have between 2 and 6 rats in a cage. The other thing is that overcrowding, it contributes to health problems, so it's better to have less rats than the recommended amount in a cage and give them plenty of space and plenty of exercise and ventilation. So that's why we have separate cages. If we had one big cage with all the rats in one cage, we'd be constantly cleaning that cage out, so the actual cleaning and the bedding wouldn't make much difference between have one huge cage and 3 smaller cages for us. Let me just think. Mites in beddings, should we freeze the bedding? Well, I would say mites in bedding are likely to only be in wood bedding unless the bedding has been damaged and the pack's been split and contaminated. So you shouldn't be using wood shavings anyway. So we have never found mites in any paper bedding, and mites don't tend to live off the host very long anyway. But don't buy any bags of bedding or food that have been ripped open or damaged. Now, we personally wouldn't freeze any of our paper bedding, because I feel you put it in the freezer overnight, you get it out to defrost it, and there will be moisture, and that could lead to mould. Now, mould is also very dangerous for rats, but I have never come across mites in paper bedding, so I wouldn't do that. Now, I know people sometimes freeze toys and things like that. Well, that is fine, providing they're dried out thoroughly, so there's no damp and no mould build up. Personally, we don't freeze anything. We replace wood toys when they get old, and we scrub plastic houses and things, and we wash all the hammocks. So that's how we do things. And let me just think, one other thing I didn't mention in my rat video, when it's time to say goodbye to your rats, I mentioned So what I forgot to say is we always allow our rats, because rats grieve and people have asked how do I deal with grieving rats, we always allow the rat to see that the friend or the sister has died. We place the dead rat on the sofa on a blanket, we get the cage mates out and we allow them to come and see the rats, and it also gives you an idea to see which ones are going to pine most by their reactions. Some of them will sniff the dead rat and run away, others will cuddle up next to them, and others will like wash them, and it's very sad. I mean, Ginny licked her sister's head and lay next to her. Poppy, when Rosie died, she cuddled up next to her and put her head on her back, and those two rats really pined for their sisters. So we do that, and we keep the rat at home for the night in a little box, and then our rats go off to the crematorium the following day for the pet crematorium service. So I think if you don't show your rats that their sister or friend has died, they're going to be constantly looking for them. Now, we don't clean the rat cage out that night either, unless the rat has had an infectious illness or been very ill, or in the cage. But we would put the remaining rats back in the cage for that night, because we feel they gain some comfort from maybe smelling their sister or their friend. And then the following day we would then scrub out the cage and put the rats back in. So for the next few days we will very carefully monitor the rats. We'll give them extra cuddles, we'll give them extra treats, because they can go off their food. So if your rats are grieving, they're going to need a lot of extra attention, and tempt them to eat if they're not eating. Anyway, I think I'm going to stop there, because I've got some more questions, but it's going to go on for a long time, so I will do another question and answer at a later date.